My name is Jeffrey May. I'm a project coordinator with WRV. For the Left Hand project, I am filling the role of site manager. Everybody remembers these 2013 floods and how devastating they were. You know, my initial exposure to the floods was what I saw on TV and in the news.
But we're going to turn now to what's being called biblical flooding across Colorado. Residents said they've never seen anything like it. The image is just shocking. Homes up to their roofs with water, rescuers using canoes to get people to safety.
It wasn't until much later that I was able to get up and see the devastation firsthand. You know, finding debris from people's homes in the stream channel 2 years after. It really gives you pause to see a pair of shoes in a stream channel that belonged to somebody that was probably in somebody's bedroom. They got, you know, completely wiped away.
It was bringing huge boulders down the creek, but it wasn't just a creek anymore, it was a floodplain. And it sounded like underwater fireworks that you were sitting front row for.
My name is Luke Mcnally. I am the Watershed Restoration Manager at Wildlands Restoration Volunteers. I had one of those rain gauges in my backyard. You know, it started raining pretty heavily that evening of September 11th, and so I was checking my rain gauge, and after a couple of hours, the rain gauge, which is about 7 inches deep, just completely filled up in a matter of hours. And that was the point at which I knew that this was no ordinary rainstorm.
I know people who were personally affected by the flood. And you know, there's the ecological impact, and then there's the personal impact. This flood really affected lives. I mean, people died in this flood. It's taken 3 years to develop the response to this because of the enormity of the problem.
Definitely WRV has been talking about this and wanting to do this for a while. So to finally get it going, and not just to get it going, but to get it going on the scale that it is now, you know, really jazzed us.
We started off literally with 20 volunteers who restored a wetland. It just took off from there. We initially had dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of volunteers. And nowadays we're doing over 100 volunteer projects a year, and we have over 3,000 volunteers.
My name is Gwen. It's been really awesome being kind of new to the organization and getting out here and immediately starting this. It's really rewarding just to see everything that's gotten done so far and just being able to jump right into it. It's really meaningful to me to be out here doing this type of restoration work.
The demographic for WRV is pretty wide. We range in age from people in their 20s, and actually earlier we do have a youth program, all the way up to late 70s, maybe even 80, I think. The literal connection to the earth is very important to everybody, and it's something that we continue to encourage. So the importance of the restoration to the state of Colorado is kind of hard to measure, I think. It's certainly a very integral part of what the state is, you know, these rivers, these riparian areas. The level of devastation from the floods is hard to describe, so it's got a very direct impact on the state, but it's very far-reaching too. I mean, you're talking about our water supply, our water sources, not just recreational areas, but healthy riparian areas that in turn feed a healthy ecosystem. Because there are many aspects of what needs to be done on the project, we have the Left Hand Watershed Oversight Group, who we're all working for. They have management of these waters that we're repairing. We have an Iron Woman Construction who's doing the macro grading of the project. We have Flywater coming in behind them. We have partners that designed the revegetation, and then we've got an engineering firm that did the designs for the restoration as a whole. And then you've got WRV who's implementing the designed and spec'd re-veg plans.
Every spring I would go out after runoff and I would rearrange the stones in the creek so we would have a pool that the fish could go to. So that's where Flywater's coming in and making it, they keep calling it fishy, making the stream fishy. They're giving habitat for the fish. Well, I'm Jessie Olsen, who you know is taking care of not only this project, which is maybe a mile long. There's several other projects upstream and several projects downstream, and she's got her work cut out for her, but she's Wonder Woman on the stream work.
I'm Jessie Olsen. I'm the Executive Director of Left Hand Watershed Oversight Group. We are a nonprofit watershed group that's charged with restoring and protecting Left Hand Creek watershed. In 2015, LWOG really became more involved in changing our role from just strictly water quality monitoring and reclamation from mine-related waste. And now we've really been focusing on flood recovery. We went from a $20,000 annual budget to now we're working on $9.7 million of funding.
You know, we're basically trying to recreate a natural riparian ecosystem because the flood washed away all of the native vegetation. And that vegetation serves many purposes. It's wildlife habitat, it stabilizes the stream banks so that if you get another flood, you don't wash the soil downstream. We're protecting the water supply here. We're taking willow cuttings, right, and we put them in the ground and they sprout and they put down deep roots into the bank to help stabilize it.
We're able to educate folks about using native plants versus, non-native plants. It's been challenging, but it's also typically been worth the effort.
I'm Laura Backus, and I'm a technical advisor for this stream restoration project. Susan Sherrod and I got a grant from Boulder County Parks and Open Space to go revisit sites along 3 streams that I had done pre-flood baseline surveys on in 2008. So we went back with my old photos and revisited the streams to do comparison studies of what had happened. What Susan and I found when we did our studies was that wherever the ground surface was at or near the water table, native vegetation was coming back like gangbusters. There were essentially lawns of baby cottonwoods. But in areas that were left higher and drier with big deposits of cobble, that first year there was virtually nothing growing there, and those are the challenge areas.
My name is John Trujillo. I'm the Senior Project Manager for Iron Woman Construction. We're the general contractor for the stream restoration project for the foothills reaches of Left Hand Creek. I see a couple of things associated with looking at this project as a success. One of them is that our current feeling in the United States right now is that government and government funding doesn't always have a happy ending, and I think this is a situation where you see government allocated money that is actually making a direct impact, a direct improvement on both the environment and on homeowners who were devastated in a flooding event. So, to start with FEMA and the disaster cleanup, that was phase 1, but then be able to come back later and say, let's develop a stream system that can handle a potential 100-year flood event again so they don't end up in the same scenario they were in 4 years ago.
My name is Jeff Crane, and I am the technical advisor for the Colorado Water Conservation Board and the Department of Local Affairs on issues relating to stream restoration. The state wanted to do a more holistic program, something that was never done before. So they developed this whole pilot project that we were going to look within watersheds and develop plans to restore watersheds and to build resiliency back into these watersheds.
So Left Hand's landscape is very diverse and it's very complicated and it's very tight. You can see just how many power lines and bridges intersect this channel, which makes restoration really complicated to execute in these tight parameters. We've absolutely had to compromise where in some cases we'll see a nice graded floodplain on one side of the river where we can give the river full access to its floodplain benches, and on the other side of the river we can't have that because we have a road corridor, and so we need to put some sort of rock wall or retaining wall in there to support that road corridor.
In a storm event where you see a lot of water going through a ditch or a channel, usually those things were designed in a manner to get water to go through there as fast as you possibly can. That increases erosion, that increases shear stress on the banks. That doesn't do a whole lot for the environment, if there is an environment to begin with that's not concrete. And then by slowing that water down and releasing it at a slower rate, you're protecting that kind of infrastructure. And the riparian values that are in that corridor are incredibly important for flood control. Not to mention that 90% of every species in the state of Colorado uses a riparian corridor for habitat. That's terrestrial species. Then you got your aquatic species and everything else, they kind of like that too.
You've got different disciplines working together. You've got, environmental engineers, you've got horticulturalists, you've got ecologists and construction people all working together to implement a project like this. I think it's a really big success story.
There's very few compromises. It's mostly a win-win situation. If you're building in resiliency for the ecosystem, for fish and wildlife habitat, riparian restoration, you are increasing your floodplain capacity. You're allowing that to happen. You are moving things out of the floodplain. We need to document all of our success stories. We need to put it together because there's a lot of resistance out there and naysayers who want to say that this program doesn't work and we should never do it again. And it's really far from the truth, and we need to have something to come back and do that. So remember that success story you put together for Lower North Fork? We need to do that everywhere. We need to put a whole compilation of that together, and then we need to prove that getting coalitions involved is the way of the future so that we can use it as a national model and not just a pilot program in Colorado.